The digestive system, there are so many organs involved and so many things that go on in the digestive system. The food that you eat has to go through 4 steps in order to be used by your cells and then the non-used part eliminated from your body. And the first is ingestion, and when you ingest something, that means you take it in, such as you're eating it. So you're putting food into your mouth. That's an intake of those nutrients. Then it has to be digested, and that's breaking that food down into smaller molecules so that they can be absorbed into your blood, and then they can go to your cells and they're usable by the cells. The absorption, of course, is vital, because even though your system can digest the food, if it doesn't get to the cells, it's not going to do your body any good. And then defecation is when you eliminate or get rid of the non-digested food. There are 2 types of digestion that go on, and think about the difference between mechanical and chemical. Mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. With mechanical digestion, it is taking, let's say, whatever you had for lunch or what you had to eat. Let's say you had a hamburger. So it's taking that meat, that hamburger, and chewing it and breaking it down and mixing it with digestive juices and getting it into smaller pieces so that the digestive juices can digest it chemically. So when you just physically break the food down, in other words, when you get finished with it mechanically, it still is hamburger. So you've got hamburger, it's just smaller pieces of the hamburger. But chemically, that's actually altering and breaking apart the molecules. So it's breaking down that food into smaller molecules of whatever makes it up. So when you get done chemically, you no longer have the hamburger. You would have lipids, and you would have proteins that made up the hamburger. In the chemical digestion, you have enzymes that are vital to this process. And they are responsible because they are acting as catalysts. And they're going to speed up those reactions. And without the enzymes, it would either happen too slowly or not happen at all. So enzymes are vital to this chemical digestion. The digestive system is what produces the enzymes, and each is very specialized. In other words, there's one type of enzyme that breaks, let's say, protein. And it'll start the protein and break it down some. Then another specific type, a different one, will take over where that one left off and break down the protein some more. And then another different specific enzyme would finish the process. So a lot of times there's many different enzymes. They're very specific. An enzyme that breaks down protein is not going to do anything to a carbohydrate or to a lipid. Here's some of the digestive enzymes. Amylase is one that breaks down starch, and that actually starts in your mouth. So you have mechanical digestion and chemical digestion beginning in the mouth. Lipase is what is used to break down fats, and that's in the stomach. Pepsin begins the process of breaking down the protein in your stomach. Renin is what digests milk in the stomach. We have the digestive system is broken down into 2 groups of organs. What we commonly refer to as the digestive tract is also known as the alimentary canal. And that is the actual organs that the food goes through. That's the digestive tract, the alimentary canal. But there are some other important organs that food never goes through, but they do something for the digestive system and the breakdown of food. And they are referred to as accessory organs. In the alimentary canal, the organs that make it up are the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and the anus. The accessory organs, you can see here, we're going to talk about later, is the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. And then we're also going to talk about the salivary glands that are in your mouth. Now they're important because they secrete substances that are needed to help break down the food, but food never goes through them. So how does the substance get there? Well, there's little tiny tubes, and these little tiny tubes are called ducts, D-U-C-T-S, and that's what carries them to the alimentary canal. For the ones pictured there, they actually are carrying their juices down into the first part of the small intestines, and the salivary glands, of course, are emptied into the mouth. So here's the accessory organs, the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder we'll talk about at the end of the vodcast. The salivary glands, of course, as we trace the path through the human body that food takes, will begin in the mouth and talk about the salivary glands. So let's trace food and go through the different organs that the food will pass through. The mouth is very important for digestion because both kinds of digestion are going on in it. Chemical is the saliva, which has amylase in it. Now saliva has another purpose as well. It lubricates the food. Have you ever swallowed a potato chip that you didn't chew very well? It doesn't go down easily. But if you chew your food well, you're helping aid the digestion because you're mechanically digesting it and getting it into smaller pieces so that the amylase and then the other digestive juices can start working on it. We have 3 pairs of salivary glands, and this is actually what gets infected. That's what we call mumps when they get infected. Salivary glands, as I said, secretes the digestive enzyme amylase, which is responsible for breaking down carbohydrates. So it's taking a starch, a complex carbohydrate, and breaking it down into the sugars that make it up, which are simple carbohydrates. Good example is like when you eat bread or when you eat crackers. Those actually start to digest the food right in your mouth. Another thing that the amylase is doing is it's going to neutralize some acidic foods, and tomatoes are acidic. The process of chewing has a scientific name. It's called mastication. And again, its function is to aid in digestion. You are actually mechanically digesting the food. And your food can be much more easily digested if you chew it. And that's what mastication is. God gave us teeth to do that. You do not need to know this for the quiz, anything about the teeth. But we want to look at how God designed each tooth and put it where it is because of the function that he had in mechanical digestion. So we have 4 different types of teeth. In the front we have the incisors, and they are flat and narrow and blade-like because they're for cutting and biting the food. Then you have the canines, which are sometimes called dog teeth. It's the ones that show real big in a vampire. Those are the canines. And they used to be called the cuspids. And they tear the food. If you've ever seen a dog in the wild or a wolf with their food and the way they shake their head and tear it, of course they have big canines. Premolars are made to crush the food, and the molars, which your wisdom teeth also are molars, they're for grinding the food. And so look at the position, look at the shape of them. They're all designed by God for their function of mechanically breaking down that food into smaller pieces. Mechanical digestion, mastication, chewing of the food. Okay, our esophagus, well, first it goes through our pharynx. And our pharynx is not a very big place, but it's a very important place. We're going to talk more about it when we talk about the respiratory system. After the food goes through the pharynx, then it is directed to the food tube, called the esophagus. The esophagus is a muscular tube that connects our mouth to our stomach. That's its function. And it's interesting, the word that they picked for it, means I will carry down, and that is what its function is. It's to carry the food from our mouth into our stomach, which does not take very long for it to do its job. It says usually it's only about 3 to 6 seconds for the food to move down into your stomach. Now in your stomach, or to get to your stomach, you can actually be laying down, you could be upside down, and your food could still get to your stomach, because our food tube, our alimentary canal, has muscles strategically placed throughout it. And those muscles contract in waves, and they move the food through the alimentary canal, or through our digestive tract. It's called peristalsis. And it's like if you take and squeeze on a toothpaste, a tube of toothpaste, and you squeeze, and that pushes then the toothpaste towards the opening. And you squeeze it and it'll move it. And that's what's going on all the time in your digestive tract. There's peristalsis going on, starting with your esophagus to move the food to the appropriate places. Now, at the beginning of the stomach, we have, remember we talked about sphincters, which is visceral muscle. It's called, sometimes referred to as the cardiac sphincter, not because it's in the heart, but because it lies close to the heart. Its technical name is a lower esophageal sphincter. And the thing you need to know about it is that is what controls the food going into our stomach, and that's what keeps the food into our stomach. And sometimes we can have a problem with that sphincter, and then we can have what's called acid reflux, where the stomach contents will go back up into the esophagus, and that would cause burning. And of course, if you've ever thrown up, you've sensed that burning. The stomach is a large hollowed organ. Its job is to temporarily store food, and it's also going to chemically and mechanically digest the food. The chemical digestion, this is not the main place, but notice that our mouth has mechanical and chemical digestion. Our stomach has mechanical and chemical digestion. The thick walls in our stomach, they churn. There's actually 3 layers of muscle that make up our stomach. And as they twist and turn, they're mixing the food with not just the amylase that's already on it and the saliva, but it's mixing it with some other juices that are made by cells in the stomach lining. And those cells are special cells that actually secrete hydrochloric acid. So this is a very acidy type of gastric juice. And it's mixing it and mixing it up with that food as it churns it. Now in that gastric juice there's enzymes such as pepsin, and that's the one for breaking down proteins. So the proteins don't start digestion until they get to your stomach, whereas the complex carbohydrates, the starches, start in your mouth. The acid would also digest your lining of your stomach. And the acid is why it burns when it goes up your throat, when you throw up. That's the burning sensation. Your esophagus is not made to have hydrochloric acid on it. And your lining of your stomach would also, and sometimes there's a problem that goes on where the acid does start eating away at the lining, and that's what's called an ulcer. And too much acid could do that, or not enough mucus. So this mucus that is produced by other cells, it's what makes it glistening and slippery inside, and its job is to protect those stomach cells so that they do not get digested and broken down by the hydrochloric acid. Now how long, you don't need to know this for a quiz or a test, but how long does food stay in our stomach? And it depends upon the type of food. If you're eating something like pudding and oatmeal and jello, that's just going to go right through your stomach real quickly. But if you eat coarse foods like celery, spinach, broccoli, stuff like that, it's going to take a lot longer. And meat takes a real long time to digest. Now the stomach mixes the food with the gastric juice, as I was talking about, and what it does once it's through and it's churning, it no longer is going to look like the food anymore. By the way, the food that's going down your esophagus, they call that a bolus. But in your stomach, when it gets done with it, they call that watery, thin watery liquid, they call it chyme. So chyme is what it's called when that food is being digested and mixed with hydrochloric acid and it's in a semi-liquid state. And that's what's going to leave your stomach and then go into the small intestines. But there's also a sphincter to control that. Look at the inside of the stomach. You can see all those waves and all those folds. The stomach lining is not the main organ for absorbing. It's not going to really absorb nutrients. But it does absorb some things. It absorbs alcohol. That's why it doesn't take long after somebody has taken drinks of alcohol before it gets into their system and they're affected by it, because their stomach will actually start to absorb it. It absorbs water and certain drugs, and that's why you have those time release capsules, like Tylenol and other things like for sinus headaches that you take. They actually, the hydrochloric acid would eat away the little capsule that it's in and release it, and some of those drugs would be absorbed right into your blood there and start having its effect upon you. Now, as I said, there's another sphincter that's controlling the food going out of the stomach, and this sphincter is called the pyloric sphincter, and it's controlling the food going out because your small intestines, especially the first few inches, like 10 inches of it, can only handle so much food at a time. So when that food moves through the pyloric sphincter and gets into your small intestines, it's very interesting. It's the acidic nature, the acidicness of the food that causes all these digestive juices then to go to the right place. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now, small intestines are not small because of length. Your book mentions 7 meters. Well, what that is, 7 meters is like 23 feet. Now, that's in an average adult. And it is, though very small, and this is why it's called small in comparison to the large, because of its diameter. The diameter is 2.5 centimeters, which is 1 inch. So that's why it's called the small intestines. Some doctors will refer to it as the small bowel. That's the same thing as the small intestine. Now, most of the chemical digestion occurs in the small intestine, but the interesting thing is it's just in that first 10 inches that most of this chemical digestion is going on out of 23 feet. The rest of the 23 feet is for absorption, and that's why God made this organ so long. It's so that all the nutrients of your food could be digested properly and then absorbed and get all the nutrients possible out. So the chemical digestion of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats all take place in the first section of the small intestine, which you need to know is called the duodenum. And it's only about 10 inches long. And as I said, when this partially digested food, this chyme, goes into the stomach, it's the acid in it, the hydrochloric acid, that stimulates the lining of the intestinal duodenum to make a hormone. And that hormone then is released in the blood, and it goes to those accessory organs. And then those accessory organs are going to be stimulated to produce the digestive juice that they do. And then they're going to secrete it, and it's going to go through, remember, the tubes that are called ducts, and it's going to be emptied then into the duodenum. And that's where all that digestion is going to be completed, in the small intestine. The remainder of the small intestine, as I said, the length is for the absorption of the nutrients. God put something else inside our small intestines that the other organs do not have in order to help with this absorption. And it's folds, it's like finger-like projections, millions of them. To me, I liken it to microscopic shag carpeting. So think about your small intestines being lined with microscopic shag carpeting. And you can see on the right-hand side, the picture there, those are called villi plural, VILLUS singularly. And their purpose is to help increase the surface area so that more absorption can be taken place. This VILLUS now is surrounded by tiny little capillaries, the smallest blood vessels that we have. Why? Because those nutrients need to be absorbed into the blood, and it's the blood that takes it to the cells. And here's a good picture showing in diagram of what villi are, and then if you look in the lower right hand corner, that's a microscopic picture of two villi. Shag carpeting. Next, the food moves into our large intestine, aka the colon, or large bowel also it's known as. It's not called large because of length, because it is smaller in length than the small intestines, because it's not going to be doing the absorbing. It's only 1.5 meters, which is about 5 to 6 feet long, but it's called large because of its diameter. The diameter is 5 centimeters, which is 2.5 inches, so that's more than 2 times the diameter of what the small intestines is. It's got several sections in there. Actually, see that little thing looking like a worm on the left-hand side hanging down? That's the appendix. And where the small intestines meets and joins the large intestines, that's called the cecum right there. And it's a little pouch. And off of the cecum is the appendix. And then you have the ascending colon going up. You got the transverse colon going across. And you got the descending colon down. And then you got the kind of S-shaped sigmoid colon. And then there's the rectum and the anus. The large intestine is not for absorbing food, although something is absorbed, which we'll talk about, but it's not food. And again, how is this food moving through the whole digestive tract, including the small intestines and the large intestines? By peristalsis, those wave-like muscular contractions. The material, then, that is not digestible, that's left over, not usable by our body, then is the waste that is going to be leaving or exiting, defecating through the anus. Here's another picture showing you the different sections of the large intestines, the colon. And you need to know that little or no digestion is going on here. That's not its purpose. Food is not absorbed in the small intestines, but it's going to be absorbing water. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Let's go back. So here's why God gave us our large intestines. One thing that is happening is as that food is moving up and across and down, that non-digested food I should say, then the waste is getting, or the water is being absorbed. And it's being absorbed, so it's not going to be like chyme anymore. And also it's going to be changing colors. It's going to be green because of the bile that's mixed with it when it first goes into the large intestines. Then as it gradually gets down the descending colon, it's going to be brown. So the function of the colon is to absorb water and minerals, but it's also to eliminate, to defecate, then the waste product. And what that's called is technically feces, aka poop. But feces is its technical name. But our large intestines has another purpose. It's very interesting that we have little creatures living inside our large intestines. It's an ideal spot for them, and it's good for us. So it's a win-win situation for them and for us, which we call a symbiotic relationship. And that is bacteria and yeast. Your book mentions you got about 300 to 500 different types of good bacteria that are living in your colon. This is not the kind that causes, illness and death. This is good stuff. They're doing good things for you. You don't realize a lot of times that there's good bacteria. And they're carrying out their whole life inside your colon. Now, when you take antibiotics, not only are you wiping out the bad guys, but you also wipe out the good guys. So that's why you'll see a lot on TV and also in the stores probiotics, and yogurt is real good because bacteria is used to make yogurt, so you're getting the good healthy bacteria back in you when you eat yogurt or when you take some of the probiotics. So there's many beneficial bacteria and yeast reproducing, living their life, and they also die. A lot of the dead weight or the dry weight of feces is dead bacteria and yeast. Bacteria and yeast produce vitamins for us, so this is how they are helping us. They're producing B1, B2, B12, and K, and they're also producing some amino acids for us. Now let's talk, last but not least, the other three accessory organs, the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder. The liver is called the master chemist of the body. There are so many functions, separate functions that go on in the liver. It's actually beneficial in many systems. Now, in the system that we're studying here, digestion, it's important because of making bile. Now, it's going to get blood into the liver by way of what's called portal vein. When you ever hear the word portal, it has something to do with the liver. And of course, the blood that leaves the liver is going to be leaving by the portal vein. Artery, excuse me. The key thing, this is what it does for the digestive system, makes bile. Bile is a greenish fluid. Its purpose is, they call, to emulsify fat or lipids. And so that's going to break it into little tiny droplets or little tiny balls so that then the digestive juices can work on it and actually break it down. If you've ever seen lard or grease, it's all clumped together, it's sticky, and it's hard to break it apart. And therefore, it would be hard to digest. So the bile emulsifies it, breaks it down into little parts so that it can be digested. The gallbladder's purpose is to store the bile that is made by the liver. That's why it is green, by the way, this little sac that we have. The pancreas, very little gland, and it's behind your stomach. It's soft, it's pinkish, it's only about 6 to 9 inches long. You don't need to know these dimensions or anything. It's only about 1 inch wide, but it's very important. You can't live without your pancreas. 97% of the cells in the pancreas make digestive juices. And those digestive juices, they call them pancreatic juices, are sent by a duct to the duodenum, and they're going to digest carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. But those other 3%, very important. They're actually called the islands of Langerhans, and they produce hormone insulin. Now, insulin is very important for us because it's going to regulate the amount of sugar that is in our blood. And of course, if that is too much insulin, not enough insulin, that causes diabetes. Well, too much insulin would, or too much sugar. And the very last thing, remember, we're looking at all these systems and how we maintain homeostasis. So the nutrients absorbed by the body through the digestive system are necessary for other body systems to maintain homeostasis. Just think, if none of the other cells got nutrients, well, then they couldn't function. So it's very important for them, or for those cells.